My name is Jasmine Moore, and I'm the Senior Director of Positive Pathways. And I also oversee or work with our Pathways to Career and Technical Education initiative that myself, my colleague, Dr. Steve Rios, and William Green, who's on the call here today, really started diving into over the past 6 months. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to talk a little bit about strategies for building a support network for foster and homeless youth at your respective institution and campuses. And I really hope this is a good opportunity to learn some more information. Maybe you're already doing some of this, or maybe you'll learn something new that you can take away. But we'll have some Q&A at the end too, if you have any questions for me. And if you have any questions throughout the time, please feel free to put them in the chats, and I will address them towards the end. So an overview of today's presentation. I'm going to provide a brief overview of the challenges and need for streamlined support services for foster and homeless youth. I'm going to talk a little bit about strategies for assessing that need at your institution. We're going to dive into some community, state, and national resources that could support your students at your campuses, and then talk about next steps and additional training opportunities for learning more about best practices for supporting these populations. So first, I always like to start out with talking about how resilient and capable this population is. This is a photo of a student who graduated at a university, I believe in California. But I've been working with foster and homeless youth for a little over 10 years now, originally starting in higher education, and then most recently, the past 4 or 5 years in the nonprofit world. And one thing that I have found with working with these students is that when they are provided the tools and resources and just knowledge and access, they are incredibly resilient and capable of achieving their goals. We know that our foster and homeless youth come from very unique challenges and backgrounds that are different from their peers. And those challenges can have an impact on their ability to persist and accomplish their educational goals. However, research has found that when support practices are in place, when they are aware of these resources, that can drastically change the outcomes of these students. Nationally, I think they're saying that they have around about a 3% to 11% graduation rate for our foster youth. But here in the state of Florida, where we have the tuition waiver, where we have the homeless tuition waiver, and we have campus support programs, we find that graduation number to be far higher than the national average because of the support systems in place. So I just always like to start with positive when talking with our students because they are incredibly capable. It's just trying to figure out how to get them access to resources to help overcome those unique challenges. So some of the common challenges that have been communicated to myself, our network, when working with these students, especially in the roles that you're in, is that one of the first and foremost is that, well, we have students, I know foster youth or homeless youth in our programs, they're enrolled in our career and technical and education programs, but retention and completion seems to be an issue. And that can be tied to number 2 here, having access to resources to accommodate basic needs. So with our foster and homeless youth, they are experiencing unique challenges that can become barriers to completion and retaining in the programs that they enroll in. Some of those can be housing, that can be food insecurity, it could be having access to independent living resources, or a stable support system to really help navigate through some of the things that their peers may be able to with those support structures in place. So those are the 2 things that are communicated to us when we're working with our professionals. Another challenge for our foster and homeless youth is just awareness of institutional or community resources that may help overcome some of those barriers to completion. Oftentimes navigating the educational world can be overwhelming, especially if you don't have that consistent support. So we find that to be a challenge with them navigating through some of these things that may be available at your campuses or institution. They just aren't sure how to access it or who to go to for help. And last but not least, access to financial resources. So we know that our foster youth and homeless youth do have access to tuition and fee exemption for applicable programs if they qualify for it. And while that's great, it covers tuition and fees and other things of that nature. There are other things associated with being enrolled in our programs. So materials, scrubs, boots, books, anything that might be required for that specific career and technical program can become a barrier. So having access to financial resources to help cover those things, we see that that's a challenge for our students as well. So the Office of Program Policy Analysis and Government Accountability, also known as APAGA, did a deep dive into Florida. And specifically, they were looking at the colleges and universities. However, they were looking at support resources in place for students that utilize the tuition fee exemption, whether that be from foster care or homelessness. And they really did a deep dive into speaking with students that are in these programs, speaking with professionals that support these students. And they have found that both students, both homeless and foster youth, perform better when there are support services in place. And they can include academic support, counseling, skill building, advocacy, and referral services. And they really help address the unique challenges and needs of our foster and homeless youth. And that can improve their academic outcomes, increasing their chances of success, and also increasing their chance of persisting and completing their programs. And we find this to be applicable across all areas, whether it's the K through 12 environment or the higher ed environment, the CTE environment. We find that when students have support services, when they are aware of these support services and they're engaged in them, that can drastically improve their academic outcomes and their completion. So that leaves me into talking a little bit about how you can start to assess, well, what does that look like at my institution or my program? Because one thing that we know about the state of Florida, things are they vary differently depending on the community you're in, the area of the state, and the resources that are available. And one thing that I usually recommend is to look at and to assess what is available at your institution, what already exists, and how can you streamline those resources? How can you communicate those resources to students so that they can be aware of them and hopefully engage in them to help overcome some of those barriers? So I'm going to go through basically 6 steps for what that looks like in your respective roles as far as assessing the need. And these are things that I went through, just some background about myself. So I was a academic advisor at Florida Atlantic University about 10 years ago, and I was appointed as the designated point of contact for foster care and homeless youth. And one of my deliverables was to try to figure out, okay, who are these students, what resources exist on our campus, and how we can maximize the resources that we already had to streamline them and make them aware and communicate them to our students. Because at the time we didn't have additional funding. This was a appointment onto my additional role as an academic advisor. So I was really trying to figure out how to maximize what already currently existed at my institution, in the community, and statewide, so that I could compile this information, provide it to our students, and really just try to create more awareness and support for these students. So these are some steps that I went through when going through that. And this is also based off of the Casey E-Foundation that talks about building campus support programs, looking at how to really maximize the resources that are already available to really lift them up for your foster care and homeless youth. So the very first step is really asking yourself and looking at it, your institution and your programs, how is this population identified? And that can come across a multitude of different ways. Students can self-report, whether they're working one-on-one with a counselor or someone in social services or in the social work department, that they have experienced foster care or homelessness. And that's how we usually are aware of these students. Also through student enrollment, admissions, or your financial department. There are usually reports tracking who these students are um, and how they're performing. Also of note, the foster care liaison and McKinney-Vento or homeless liaisons at the school districts are very, very key partners because they are aware of who these students are, they are tracking them. And knowing how they're identified is the first step because that's going to tell you a lot about, well, the number of population of these students at your campus, who they're already connected to, and if there's a gap or a way to get more people to self-report, or if there needs to be a single point of contact for these students to go through so that when they are identified, they're referred to the correct people on your campus. So after you've identified who those students are and how they're identified and what that process looks like, it's really important to look at and assess what are the needs of those students at your respective institution and campuses, because it may vary depending on what county you're in versus another county, depending on things that are in place. So finding a way to identify any challenges or barriers that may exist by assessing the needs of this population. And that could be talking to the people who work with these students on a day-to-day basis. It could be sending out a survey to get more information, but really trying to figure out and identify what are their needs and what are the gaps that are serving as challenges from them completing and persisting in the programs. And that too will also tell you how the community can get involved as well, which I'll talk a little bit about here in a minute. The third step is looking at what resources exist on your campus. So if students are able to utilize their tuition and fee exemption, who is processing that, and are students aware of who that person is, their families or caregivers? That's really important because when students are enrolling in different programs or interested in different technical programs, knowing who is in charge of that process, if that's applicable, is really important just to make sure that they're getting the benefits and the resources through that initiative. Also looking at if there are any specific like campus or institution specific scholarships or grants that students can apply for. I know that within our network, we've talked a lot about the Open Door Grants, which is open for all students, but that's a great resource for students to really get additional funds to cover those expenses that their waiver or other funding may not cover. And then also looking at, are there any resources on your campus or institution that can address additional needs for students? So food insecurity is a huge one. You know, on our last statewide call, we had someone that talked about a food pantry that they were connected with. We also had a director that shared about how he oversees the homeless tuition fee exemption, that verification process on his campus. And they have a notary there that can help notarize any documents for that student to get that waiver. So having something like a notary that students have accessible, that removes a barrier from them having to pay for transportation, to go to someone, to pay for a notary. So thinking about things like that that may already exist and how you can implement them or advertise them for your students to help remove any of those things that can become barriers. The fourth step is looking at, is there a point of contact on your campus or your institution? And if that person is you, great. But is there someone that, if a student that is a foster care or homeless student and they are, you know, interested in specific programs, what does that look like for them? Also looking at what does it look like if a new student is coming to your career technical program, and they have this waiver and they call your institution, what does that look like when they call? Does a person who answered the phone know who to direct them to? Are they aware of what this looks like? So really thinking about that process, because sometimes that can serve as a barrier for students when they're contacting specific institutions or they're interested in programs, and having to talk to 5 or 6 different people before getting to the right person can be a little daunting. So just thinking about, is it possible to have a point of contact there and what that would look like as far as being that referral agent for these students on your campus to resources. The fifth step is looking at who are the key stakeholders that should be involved in this conversation. And this is not an exhaustive list, it's just a list that usually most commonly these people are involved in these conversations. So obviously the McKinney-Vento or foster youth liaison, if that's appropriate, anyone that works or oversees a financial aid process, enrollment or admissions, someone from student services or the social work department. Student counseling, access to mental health resources is huge, and then academic services and support. And these all serve as referrals for students as they're navigating through the program at different times throughout their enrollment. And students being aware of these referrals and these resources and what they may have to offer can really help when they are pursuing their programs. Financial aid, for instance, if a student is in a program and they need to apply for financial aid, knowing when that application opens up, knowing when they should submit that, if there's any campus-specific things that they can apply for. On the other side of that, having access to student counseling, mental health resources to help address those other needs that can serve as barriers or challenges to persistence and completion. So just thinking about who those key champions can be at your respective institutions and how you can make appropriate referrals if you're working with a student who comes to you with a need that's outside of your scope. And the sixth step is, how can you streamline resources and communicate them to students? So this is usually the hugest thing is, yes, there are resources and things available, but students may not know where to find them. So does your institution have this publicized on a website? Is there a one-pager that you can develop to provide to students or email to students that you know have experienced foster care or experiencing homelessness that they can refer back to you for additional resources and support? So those are just examples of how you can streamline these resources and how students can have access to this information. Developing and sharing a report of current foster and homeless youth enrolled in your CTE programs with stakeholders can be useful as well, just to track their progress and conduct any early intervention. And then if there's a designated point of contact, they can help make appropriate referrals. If a student knows to go to a specific person and they are struggling with food insecurity, or they're not sure how to do their FAFSA or what the FAFSA is, who are those appropriate points of contact that you can refer them to help them with those issues. So that's looking at those 6 steps, or kind of looking at assessing what's available at your institution and how you can maximize what's already currently available to possibly streamline some information for your students that are experiencing foster care and homelessness to help build that support network. It's also important to be aware of what's available in your community, what's available statewide, and then there's a couple of national programs as well that provide some financial support for students who have experienced foster care or homelessness. And that way they have a network that is locally, but they can also tap into some of these statewide, community, or national resources to help fill in the gap for some of the things that they need to continue to persist and complete their programs. So we went over some institutional resources and key points of contact. So next I'm going to take you through some of these community resources. The ones that are hyperlinked here, and I'm going to send this to everyone at the end of this presentation so you can actually click on this and go through yourself, but I'm going to go through the hyperlink ones in detail just to kind of give you an overview on how they can help build that support network. The very first one, looking at nonprofit organizations, oftentimes we find that a lot of different counties may have nonprofits that are working with these students, either at the K through 12 level or as they transition into adulthood, to help them with achieving their post-secondary and career and educational goals. So just doing some benchmarking in the county that you're in and seeing if there are any nonprofit organizations and if you can make that connection, because that can help open up a door for if they have students that are coming to your program or that are in your programs, or vice versa, with just being knowledgeable about what resources or support that they may offer. So the very first one that I'm going to go through here is talking about the continuum of, community-based care contacts. So in our first statewide call that we had back in February, and in some of the surveys that we've sent out, a lot of you asked for, well, how do I get in contact with the case manager or the caseworker that's working with my foster youth? Or who that independent living person is. So we actually have posted on our Positive Pathways website, and this is on the Department of Children and Families website as well. You can find out who that point of contact is for your community, for your county's community-based care organization. And you can reach out to them. If a student's coming to you and self-disclose that I experience foster care, but I don't really, have contact with anyone. I'm not sure if I'm even eligible for the waiver. This would be a great time to, connect with us, provide this information to the student, and they can reach out to the CBC to see if they are indeed eligible for that or any other services. So again, this is hyperlinked in the PowerPoint that I'm going to send to you. And it's also posted on our website so that you can have this as a resource for students. And this is specifically for those who have experienced foster care. So our community-based care organizations work with our youth who've experienced dependency of some sort. Now, on the other side, with our students who have experienced homelessness, we often connect them to continuum of care organizations. And these are organizations, there's one, they're all over the state of Florida, but there's one assigned to one or two counties where they are there and they're the designated organization to assist with any housing or homeless challenges. So if you're working with a student and they disclose that they've experienced homelessness, they need to get it certified, or they need additional resources. Again, this is posted on our website, but it's also on the Department of Children and Families website as well. You can find out who that specific organization is, who that contact information is, and that information can be provided to the students so that they can get connected to additional resources to find that stability and to overcome any barriers. This next resource for community resources, you may have heard of this. It's through Aunt Bertha, which is kind of the name of the software, but the official website is findhelp.org. This is a really great resource for helping students connect to different community resources that can address these categories that you see above. So they have programs associated with food, with housing, goods and services, transportation, health, money, care, education, work, and even legal services. So this website, students can type in their zip code. So I think I put in St. Pete here, just for example, and it will pull up all of the programs. They'll choose the specific category that they're looking for, and they can go through, and it gives them not only the organization, but who that point of contact is, what the eligibility requirements are, and how to get help. So I've personally provided this to some students where, we've maximized our resources everywhere else, and we were able to really get them some help in the community to help address some of those barriers to persistence and program completion. So this is a great resource to provide for students as well, especially if you're trying to develop some type of resource guide. I would recommend that this be in that. And last but not least, we have what's called Care Portal. Now, this is something that the institution or the point of contact would have to sign up for. I don't believe that there's a cost associated with this, but a lot of the nonprofits are using it across the state of Florida. And this connects to faith-based organizations in that community. So how it works is that the point of contact or the institution submits a need on behalf of whatever the student told them. So let's say a student is experiencing food insecurity and they need help with groceries. So that representative from the institution would put in the need that they're working with a student that is in need of groceries. They would submit the need, and then the community, it would go out to the community and someone would basically provide that resource for the students. And it's all vetted through this care portal process. And it really helps address some of those needs that are outside of the scope of financial aid and scholarships and things like that. So if you're interested in this, it's hyperlinked in the PowerPoint, but definitely take a look at it and see if it's something appropriate for your institution or something that you're doing as far as, you know, helping getting students connected to additional resources. So that was an overview of the community resources. We did an overview of how to assess resources at your institutions. And now we're going to talk a little bit about statewide resources. So I'm going to go into detail about a couple of these here, but I do want to touch base on one, the Southern Scholarship Foundation. This is a great resource for students. They provide housing at partner institutions throughout different areas in the state of Florida. And this is also open for students who are pursuing career and technical education programs. So I definitely encourage you to look at it and see where they're located and where they have houses built and how potentially students can get involved in that, because we know that housing is a huge need statewide, and the work that they're doing is really phenomenal. And then obviously we have the Office of Student Financial Assistance. We've had Pedro Hernandez and Darren Menz come out to a couple of our meetings now to talk about the Open Door Grant Program. They also have on their website other materials and resources for students, FAFSA guides and things of that nature for opportunities to help fund their career and educational goals. So the Positive Pathways Program, which is what I oversee, we are more so a statewide resource for professionals. We also work with students as well to get them connected to different organizations and partners. But we are here and we provide technical assistance. We do monthly meetings where we talk about legislative changes, updates, resources. We also conduct regional meetings as well, where we'll go to specific regions of the states and host a meeting and get everyone together face to face to discuss specific needs and challenges as it relates to that community. So our goal is to make sure that our professionals who are working with these youth have access to resources and support that can help their students be successful. And again, we've been doing this since 2016, and primarily we've been focusing on the college and university. But over the past year, we've really taken a focus on looking at the career and technical education space as well, because that is a valuable opportunity for our students for them to achieve their goals. So yes, please check us out if you haven't already. Now, specifically for foster youth. So for youth who are aging out of foster care or have recently transitioned out of foster care, there is something called the Office of Continuing Care, and they oversee Hope Navigators. And Hope Navigators are students or younger students that connect one-on-one with young people to provide them with resources about information on things that they're eligible for. So whether that be any healthcare benefits, PES, which stands for the Post-Educational Supplementary Scholarship, they're able to get additional funding if they're enrolled in programs. They can also connect them to other resources. They can help them connect them to the CBC to see if they're eligible for the waiver. So this is just a really good resource for any students that you're working with that are aging out or have already aged out of foster care, and if they have any specific questions about what they're eligible for. So please get them connected to this organization. The next statewide resource is the AOK Scholars Program. So the AOK Scholars Program is really phenomenal because they work with students that are not only just pursuing post-secondary education, but they also are working with students in career and technical education programs as well, where they provide one-on-one support. They get assigned an AOK specialist, an AOK scholar, and they work with them to see how they're doing and check in on their academic goals. And they also provide a lot of financial literacy and coaching. And one thing that they get with that is access to emergency funding to help overcome anything that can be a barrier to their persistence in completion. So, for example, if a student's in the AOK Scholars Program and they tell their coach that their car broke down and now they can no longer, get to that class that they need for their certificate. They'll meet with their coach, they'll assess their budget, and they'll see if they can potentially cover, that fee to get their car fixed, or provide groceries if they are experiencing food insecurity. And once a student is in the program, they stay with them through their first completion. I think up until their bachelor's degree, actually. So this is a really great program because it really can help fill in the gap in the needs for students that can become barriers to them achieving their educational goals. They tend to accept people every semester. So their fall applications they've already done recruitment for that, but they will be opening up their spring 2025 application sometime in October or November. So they come out and they speak to our Positive Pathways Network when that time comes. So that's another great opportunity to stay involved and to hear about this, because this can be a great resource for our career and technical education students, especially now that AOK Scholars has brought them on board. And then last, just a couple of national resources that are of value for our students. So the Association for Career and Technical Education, they have scholarships and grants that students can apply for. And I think some specific needs-based ones that they can apply for to help fill in the gap for any needs that they may have with pursuing their educational goals. And then the Schoolhouse Connection Scholarship Program. This is specifically for students who have experienced homelessness. The ACTI one is for foster care or homelessness, but the Schoolhouse is only for homeless students. But they provide them with a stipend, they get assigned a coach, and then they also have the opportunity to I think once a year they go up to DC to do some advocacy work. And it's just a really great opportunity to connect with other people statewide, nationwide, that have experienced the same thing, but also develop some of those skill sets and get some additional funding to help overcome any financial barriers. So in summary, some of the things that I talked about for strategies for building a support network is first and foremost assessing the current needs of your students and the resources at your institution. That will really give you a navigation for what that might look like as far as what you can develop, whether it's a one-pager or publication of resources on your website that students can have access to. Connecting with institutional and community stakeholders that can assist with supporting the needs of foster care and homeless youth. So developing those relationships really help with making those referrals, especially if you're working with the student and your institution has maximized all resources, but you may be aware of something in the community that you can refer them to. So some of those community resources that we talked about, or statewide resources. And then the last one, evaluate how you can organize these resources and how they can be communicated to students. So whether that's developing a one-pager or a resource guide, if there is a point of contact, having that accessible for them to provide to students, and then also having this available on your website. So if students are looking on their own, they can find it and it's easily accessible to them. So I did just want to go over a couple of additional training opportunities if you're interested. And this is not through Positive Pathways. These are just partners that are throughout the states. So the Foster and Success Coaching Institute, that is led by an organization called Cetera that's out of the Tampa area. They provide basically training for how to work with students who've experienced foster care or other challenging situations. And it provides you with the framework of helping and working with those students, with getting them engaged and getting them to resources. Same thing with the appreciative advising framework. That's an advising framework for, again, developing relationships with students and really getting them to be engaged with you and programs at your institutions. The Positive Pathways monthly meetings, we host a meeting the first Wednesday of every month where we talk about resources, any updates, any changes as it relates to supporting these students that might be of use to you. And then last but not least, ACTE or ACTE, they have a great document, and I'll share this when I send out the PowerPoint. But they have developed a document for foster care and then also for homelessness, how to support students in the CTE environment. And these are just some reflection questions that you can go through when you're looking at, if you're interested in developing new strategies, some things to go through that can help you with your initiative. So I will share this as well when I send out the PowerPoint. So please take a look at that if you haven't already. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening. I will definitely open it up for questions now if anyone has any. If you want to contact me afterwards, you can email me at pathways@educatetomorrow.org, or you can visit our website at positivepathwaysflorida.org. You can join our network for additional training opportunities for some of the information that I shared here within the network. And yeah, if you have any questions, just please let me know.